She was already behind the sheriff's door when the cowboy stepped into the street and reached for her hand in front of everyone. Rain hammered the wooden roof, each drop sharp as gravel, while the lantern on the post flickered low, threatening to go out. Mud clung to her boots as she stood at the edge of the steps, one foot forward, one still held back. Behind her, the cell door creaked open. In front of her, he didn't say a word, just stood there, hand out, steady, waiting. Somewhere down the street, a horse snorted, restless in the dark, and no one moved. "Tell me, would you take his hand?" The train came in slow iron wheels grinding against the track like it had something heavy to say and no easy way to say it. Dust rolled up along the platform at Dry Creek Ridge, settling over boots, coats, and the wide-brimmed hats of the few who had come to watch. Caleb Dawson stood apart from the others, not leaning, not shifting, just there, with his hands resting loose at his sides, the way a man stands when he's already made up his mind about something and doesn't intend to revisit it. The conductor called out the stop. Doors opened. One by one, passengers stepped down, most of them carrying more than they needed and looking like they didn't plan to stay. She came last. A single suitcase. Dark, worn at the edges. Her dress had been pressed once long before the journey, but the road had taken its toll. Dust clung to the hem. The fabric sat stiff in places where it had dried and wrinkled again. She didn't hurry, didn't look around for anyone waving, just stepped down and stood still for a moment, like she was letting the ground decide if it would hold her. A woman near the water barrel pulled her boy closer without saying a word. The boy looked anyway, curious in the way children are before they're taught not to be. Caleb watched all of it. Then he stepped forward. "Lila Brooks?" he asked. She turned her head toward him. Not fast. Just enough. "Yes, sir." Her voice didn't carry far. It didn't need to. He nodded once. No smile. No second look. "I'm Caleb Dawson." That was all. No welcome. No question about the trip. No mention of the letter they had both signed months ago. He reached for the suitcase. She let him take it. "No love," he said, as he turned toward the road, his voice plain as dry wood. No questions. Just work. He didn't check if she agreed. He had already assumed she understood. Behind them, someone muttered something low. Another voice answered. The kind of talk that sticks to the air even after the words are gone. Lila picked up her skirt just enough to keep it from dragging and followed. The road out of town cut through pale dirt and scattered stone. Wind moved across it without asking permission, carrying the smell of old hay and distant rain that never quite made it this far. They walked side by side, but not together. Caleb kept his eyes ahead. He moved with the steady pace of someone who knew every turn before it came. Lila walked without trying to match him, but she didn't fall behind either. After a while, the buildings of Dry Creek Ridge faded into low shapes and then into nothing at all. The ranch sat on a stretch of land that looked like it had been asked too much of and given just enough to survive. The fence leaned in places. One of the gates hung lower than it should. A length of wire had been tied twice where it had snapped. Caleb stepped through and set the suitcase down on the porch. "This is it," he said. No apology, no explanation. The door creaked when he pushed it open. Inside, the air held the faint smell of coffee gone cold and wood smoke that had settled into the walls over years. "There's a room off the back," he said. "Yours." He set her suitcase just inside the doorway and stepped away from it. "Supper's at 6. If I'm in, I eat. If I'm not, I don't." Lila nodded once. She didn't ask what came next, didn't ask where anything was. Caleb watched her for a second longer than he meant to, then turned and walked back out, the screen door snapping shut behind him. The yard stretched quiet under the afternoon light. Somewhere beyond the far fence, a horse shifted its weight, the soft thud of hoof against dry ground carrying through the stillness. Inside, Lila stood where he had left her. She set her hand on the suitcase, then let it fall. Moved through the room slowly, not searching, not judging, just taking the measure of what was there. A table with one chair pulled out and never pushed back. A tin cup by the sink with a faint line of coffee left at the bottom. A stove that had been cleaned but not recently. She stepped into the back room. The bed was narrow. The blanket folded once across it, clean but worn thin at the edges. A small window faced east, though the glass had a crack running through one corner. She set the suitcase down at the foot of the bed. For a long moment, she didn't move. Outside, the wind pressed against the walls and then slipped past, like it had done 1,000 times before and would do 1,000 more. Lila reached down, opened the suitcase, and took out the few things she had left, folded them once more, set them in place. Then she stood again, looking at the room as if it had always been waiting for her and she had simply arrived late. No one called her name. No one asked if she needed anything. The house held its silence, and she stayed. Morning came thin and pale over Dry Creek Ridge. The kind of light that didn't rush in, just settled slow across the land like it had nowhere else to be. Lila was already awake. The stove had been cleared. Ash swept into a small tin bucket and set by the door. A pot of coffee sat warming, not fresh, but not forgotten either. The cup Caleb had left the night before had been rinsed and placed upside down near the basin, water still clinging to its rim. Outside, the wind had picked up again, dragging dust along the yard in low, restless lines. Caleb stepped in from the porch, boots carrying dry dirt across the floor. He stopped just inside. Something was different. Not new, just set right. He glanced once toward the back room. The door was open. Bed made. Blanket pulled tight. No crease left where someone had slept. He said nothing. Poured himself coffee. Took a sip. It had been reheated just enough. He set the cup down and went back out. Lila was near the fence line. One post leaned hard to the side, wire slack between it and the next. She had a length of pliers in one hand, the other steady on the post as she pulled the wire taut. The metal groaned, then held. Her sleeves were rolled. Dust clung to her forearms. The wind lifted a loose strand of her hair, but she didn't brush it away. Caleb stood by the gate for a moment, watching. "You'll cut your hand if you twist it like that," he said. She didn't jump, just shifted her grip slightly, testing the wire again. "It'll hold," she answered. He walked over, pressed the post once with his boot. It stayed. He nodded. "Once." "Tools go back in the shed," he said. "Yes, sir." That was it. He turned away, but slower than before. By noon, the heat had come down hard over the ridge, the kind that made the ground crack a little wider and the air sit heavy in the chest. A shout carried across the road, high, sharp. Caleb looked up from where he was checking the saddle straps. A boy, no more than 8, had slipped near the corral fence. A young horse, still green and nervous, reared back, rope dragging loose behind it. The animal's eyes rolled white, hooves striking at the dirt in quick, panicked beats. The boy froze. Didn't move. Couldn't. Lila was already running. Not fast in a wild way. Just straight. She caught the rope before it snapped tight, her boots sliding in the dust. The horse jerked, pulling hard, head tossing. She didn't shout, didn't yank, just leaned her weight back and stepped to the side, guiding the animal's movement instead of fighting it. Slow, firm. The horse circled once, twice, then stopped, breathing heavy. The boy scrambled backward, hands shaking, eyes wide. Lila let the rope go slack, then tied it off to the post without looking at him. "You all right?" she asked. He nodded too fast. She gave a small nod back, like that was enough. Caleb had crossed the yard by then, not running, not slow either. He looked at the horse, then at the knot she had tied. Clean, secure. He looked at her last. She had already stepped away, brushing dust from her skirt as if nothing had happened. "You know horses?" he asked. "A little," she said. That was all she offered. The boy's mother called from the road, voice tight with worry. She pulled him close, checked him over, then looked once toward Lila before turning away again. Not unkind, just unsure. By late afternoon, the sun had started to dip, pulling long shadows across the yard. Caleb sat on the low step outside the barn, a whetstone in his hand, drawing it slow across a blade. The sound was steady, back and forth, back and forth. Lila moved through the yard with a bucket, stopping at the pump to fill it. The handle creaked as she worked it, water spilling clear and cold into the tin. She carried it without sloshing, set it down near the trough, did the work like she had always done it there. Caleb didn't look up right away, but he noticed. Every small thing, the way the gate no longer dragged when it opened. The hinge had been tightened. The latch sat straighter in its slot. The kitchen window, which had rattled in the wind the night before, stayed quiet now. Nothing spoken, nothing pointed out. Just different. Toward evening, a wagon rolled slow along the road toward town. Gideon Pike sat high on the seat, reins loose in his hands, eyes sharp under the brim of his hat. He slowed near the fence, letting the wheels settle in the dirt. "That your new help?" he called out. Caleb didn't answer right away. "Wife," he said after a moment. Gideon's gaze lingered on Lila, who stood near the pump, hands still wet, watching without stepping closer. "From the east, I hear," Gideon said. "Don't hear much that matters," Caleb replied. Gideon smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "No," he said. "Guess we'll see." The wagon creaked forward again, wheels cutting shallow lines into the road as it went. Dust rose behind it, then settled. Caleb stood up, slid the blade back into its sheath, and walked past Lila without stopping. "Supper at 6, he said. "Same as before." Same tone, but he paused at the door this time. Just for a second, then went inside. Lila remained by the pump a moment longer, the last of the water dripping from her hands into the dirt. The wind shifted, carried something new with it. Not warm, not yet, but not as cold as it had been. The wind turned sometime in the night. By morning, the sky hung low over Dry Creek Ridge, a flat gray that pressed close to the land. The kind of sky that didn't promise anything good, only something that needed to be endured. Lila stood by the stove, stirring a pot slow and steady. The coffee had already been poured. Caleb's cup sat where he always left it, near the edge of the table. He came in from the yard with mud on his boots. "Storm's building," he said, more to the room than to her. She glanced toward the window. The glass had gone dull with the shift in light. "You heading out?" she asked. He nodded once, already reaching for his coat hanging on the peg by the door. "East fence won't hold if the ground gives," he said. He pulled the coat on, then paused just long enough to pick up his hat. "Stay inside," he added, not turning back. The door closed behind him. The wind rose not long after. It started low, like a breath pulled through the hills, then built until it found every loose board, every gap in the frame. Rain followed quick, sharp against the roof, tapping at first, then striking hard enough to blur the edges of the yard. Lila set the spoon down. The pot continued to simmer. She moved to the window, wiping a clear line through the fogged glass with the side of her hand. Nothing but shifting gray. Time moved without markers. No sun, no shadow, just the sound of rain and the stove's steady crackle. She sat once, stood again, walked to the door and back. Caleb had said he'd return before it turned heavy. It had already gone past heavy. The clock on the wall ticked soft and stubborn, each minute stretching longer than the last. She pulled on her coat. It was his. Too large at the shoulders, the sleeves falling past her wrists. She rolled them once, then again. The lantern sat by the door. She lit it without hesitation, shielding the flame with her palm until it steadied. When she stepped outside, the wind hit her full, cold, hard. Rain soaked through the fabric before she made it past the first fence line. The ground had turned slick, mud pulling at her boots with each step. The path to the east ridge barely held shape, water cutting new lines through it. She kept moving. Didn't call his name at first, saved her breath. The storm swallowed sound anyway. At the base of the slope, she heard it. Not loud, just wrong. A shift. Wood against stone. Something strained. She raised the lantern. The light broke apart in the rain, scattering in thin pieces across the dark. Then she saw him. The wagon had tipped sideways near the fence post, one wheel buried deep in the softened ground. Caleb was half under it, his leg pinned between the axle and a slab of rock that had slid loose from the slope. Water ran around him, rising slow. He looked up when the light found him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "I told you to stay inside," he said, his voice rough but steady. "You were late," she answered. She set the lantern down where it would hold, then moved to the wagon. Her hands went to the wood, testing the weight. It didn't budge. She stepped back, scanning once. The rope lay half-coiled near the fence, dragged loose from where it had been tied. She grabbed it, wrapped it around the higher spoke, pulling it tight, knotting it once, then again. The rain stung her face. Her fingers slipped, then caught again. "Don't rush it," Caleb said. "I'm not," she answered. She leaned back, pulling the rope across her shoulder, using her weight instead of her arms. The wagon shifted an inch, then settled again. She adjusted her footing, boots sinking deeper, pulled again. The wood creaked. The rock shifted just enough. "Now," she said. Caleb braced himself, pushing with what he could. The pressure broke. His legs slid free and the wagon dropped back into place with a dull, heavy sound. For a second, he didn't move. Then he tried to stand. Didn't quite make it. She was there before he fell, not catching him, just steadying. "Can you walk?" she asked. He tested the weight, jaw tightening once. "I can," he said. He leaned on her, but not fully. She didn't adjust, didn't try to carry more than he gave. They moved slow, step by step through the mud, the lantern swinging low between them, light breaking across the ground in uneven circles. By the time the cabin came into view, both were soaked through. The door slammed open under the wind. Inside, the fire had held. Barely. She guided him to the chair near the stove. He sat without protest. Water dripped from his coat onto the floor in steady taps. She moved without speaking, pulled a dry blanket from the back room, set it over his shoulders, fed the fire until the flames rose again, filling the room with heat that came slow but sure. He watched her from where he sat, didn't speak, didn't look away. When she finally stopped moving, she stood by the table, one hand resting against the wood. The room settled. Only the sound of rain remained, softer now against the roof. Caleb shifted, leaning forward slightly. "You didn't have to come," he said. She didn't answer right away. Then quietly, "You didn't come back." That was all. He leaned back again, the blanket pulling tighter around him. His eyes dropped to the floor, then lifted once more. Something had changed. Not loud, not clear, but there. And it stayed. The storm passed in the night, leaving the ground heavy and dark, the kind of wet that held onto your boots and made every step count for more than it should. Morning came quiet. Too quiet. Caleb was already outside when Lila stepped onto the porch. He moved slower than usual, favoring one leg just enough to notice if you were looking for it. The fence line still needed tending. The wagon sat where it had been dragged back, one wheel crooked, waiting. He didn't mention the night before. Didn't thank her. But when he passed by the pump, he filled 2 cups instead of 1 and left one on the edge of the post where she stood. Didn't say it was for her. Just left it there. By midday, the sun had burned through the last of the clouds. The road to town dried in patches, streaks of mud turning to dust again. Caleb hitched the horse without asking if she wanted to come. Lila climbed up anyway. They rode in the same silence they had learned. But it wasn't the same silence as before. It held something steadier now, something that didn't need to be named. Dry Creek Ridge looked the same from a distance, but as they rode in, heads turned sooner, stayed longer. Gideon Pike stood outside his store, one hand hooked in his vest, watching them come down the road like he had been expecting it. "You hear?" he called before they even tied off the reins. Caleb didn't answer. "Man rode in this morning," Gideon went on, "from back east." Lila didn't stop walking, but her step changed just enough to feel. Inside the store, the air smelled of flour and tobacco. A receipt book lay open on the counter, a pencil resting across it like it had been set down mid-thought. The bell above the door hadn't even settled when the pimp stepped forward. Clean coat. No dust on his boots. Hat held just a little too carefully in his hand. "Miss Brooks," he said. Lila stopped. Didn't turn right away. Caleb stepped half a pace forward, not blocking. Just there. "You've got the wrong place," Caleb said. The man smiled. Thin, practiced. "I don't believe I do," he answered. "Harold Whitaker." He didn't offer a hand. Didn't need to. "I represent Mr. Langford. Boston." He reached into his coat, pulling out folded papers, edges sharp and uncreased. Miss Brooks left his employment under unsettled terms. The store had gone quiet. Even the sound of the wind outside seemed to stop at the door. "I didn't take anything," Lila said. Her voice was even, not raised. Whitaker unfolded the paper slowly, letting it catch the light. "Missing funds." "Damaged reputation," he said, as if reading from a list he had memorized. "We're prepared to pursue legal remedy." Sheriff Tom Bell stepped in from the doorway, hat low over his eyes. He looked from Whitaker to Lila, then to Caleb. "You got proof of that?" he asked. Whitaker held up the paper. Signed statements, records. Tom took it, scanned it once. His jaw tightened just enough to show. He looked at Lila. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me, just for the night, till we sort this proper." Caleb's hand moved before he thought about it, settling against Lila's back. Not pushing, not pulling, just there. "She ain't going anywhere," he said. Tom met his eyes. "You want this done right, Caleb? You let me do it my way." The space between them held. Then Lila stepped forward. "It's all right," she said. Caleb didn't move. "Lila, it's all right." She didn't look at him when she said it. Tom nodded once, stepping aside. The walk to the sheriff's office was short, felt longer. The room inside was small. One cot, one narrow window. No bars, just a door that closed solid. Tom didn't lock it right away. He stood there, hat in his hands. "This ain't judgment," he said. "Just time." Lila nodded. Caleb stayed outside. Didn't sit, didn't lean. Just stood with his hands curled tight at his sides, staring at the door like it might open if he looked hard enough. Night came slow. The lamp inside burned low. Through the small window, Lila could see the edge of the street, the dust settling again where boots had passed. She sat on the cot, hands folded in her lap. Didn't cry, didn't call out. Outside, Caleb hadn't moved. Not when the sun dropped. Not when the store lights went out one by one. Not when the wind came back, softer this time. Tom stepped out once, looked at him, then went back inside without saying a word. The town settled, but Caleb stayed, and that was seen. Morning came without ceremony. No sunrise worth noticing, just a pale strip of light sliding between the buildings, catching on dust that hadn't settled yet. The town moved slow, like it wasn't sure what to do with what it had witnessed the night before. Caleb was still there. Same place. Same stance. Hat pulled low. Coat stiff with dried rain and dust. He hadn't stepped away, not once. When the door finally opened, it didn't creak like usual. It sounded louder. Lila stepped out first. Same dress. Same quiet posture. But something in the way she held her shoulders had shifted, just enough to show she had walked through something and come back with it still on her. Tom Bell followed behind, holding the folded paper loosely in one hand. He cleared his throat once. "Not enough to hold her," he said, voice carrying across the porch and into the street. "No charge stands. That was all. No apology. No explanation." Whitaker stood near the far post, jaw set tight. The paper in Tom's hand wasn't his anymore. Caleb didn't look at him, didn't look at Tom either. He looked at Lila. She stepped down from the porch. The dust shifted under her boots, soft and uncertain. For a moment, no one moved. Then she started walking, not toward him, past him, like she had decided something in the quiet of that room and carried it out with her. Caleb turned, followed. Not fast, not slow. Just enough to close the space she left behind. The town watched. Every step, every inch of distance between them. She reached the middle of the street before he caught up. Didn't call her name. Didn't say a word. He just reached out. His hand found hers. Not gentle. Not careful. Certain. The kind of hold that didn't ask permission and didn't leave room for doubt. Lila stopped. The world around them seemed to narrow to that one point where their hands met. She looked down at it once, then up at him. Caleb didn't explain, didn't soften. "I don't take back what's mine," he said, low enough that only she heard it. It wasn't loud, but it carried, in the way people hear things they're not meant to. No one spoke. No one laughed. Even Gideon Pike, leaning against the post outside his store, didn't say a word. Lila didn't pull away. That was enough. They walked back to the horses together. No distance now. No space left to measure. The ride home was quieter than before. Not empty. Just settled. The ranch came into view with the same worn lines it had always held. The fence still leaned. The wagon still needed fixing. The land hadn't changed. but something had. Caleb tied off the reins, slower than usual. Lila stepped down, smoothing her skirt once out of habit. Neither of them rushed inside. The porch creaked under their weight. The door opened. Same room, same table, same cup near the sink. But the air felt different. Later that afternoon, the sound of hammering carried across the yard. Steady, measured. Lila stepped outside. Caleb was on the roof. One board already lifted, another set in its place. "You fixing it?" she asked. He didn't look down. Needed doing. She watched him work for a while, then moved to the side of the house. The east wall. The small window there caught the first light every morning, though the crack in the glass had dulled it. She stood there, hand resting against the frame. The hammering stopped. A moment later, Caleb climbed down, tools in hand. He walked past her, then stopped, looked at the window, looked at her. "Glass'll be clearer tomorrow," he said. Not a promise, not a question, just something already decided. Days passed, not many. Enough. The fence stood straighter. The wagon wheel turned true again. The mornings came in cleaner through the new pane, light cutting across the bed in a line that reached farther each day. One morning, the wind had dropped to almost nothing, the kind of stillness that lets every small sound carry. Lila stood on the porch, barefoot, the wood warm under her feet. She didn't move for a long time, just stood there, one hand resting low against her dress. Caleb came out behind her. Paused. Didn't ask. Didn't speak. She reached back, took his hand, guided it forward, set it there. He went still, didn't pull away, didn't press harder, just stayed. The silence stretched, then settled. Caleb's jaw tightened once, then eased. He nodded, slow, like a man agreeing to something he had already known but hadn't said out loud. Lila didn't smile, didn't need to. The wind moved again, light this time, brushing past them and out across the land. Nothing in the distance changed. The ridge stood the same. The road still led back to town. But on that porch, under that quiet sky, something had taken root that wasn't leaving, and this time, neither of them did. Do you want me to revise or expand any chapter? Now imagine standing there yourself, on that quiet porch, with the wind moving soft across the land, and nothing left to prove to anyone, just a hand in yours that didn't let go when it mattered most. Some folks spend their whole lives waiting to be chosen, not for what they can give, not for what they've done, but simply for who they are when everything else falls away. Lila never asked for that kind of promise, and Caleb wasn't a man who spoke in promises, but somewhere between the silence, the storms, and the long days that didn't offer much, they found something steadier than words, a kind of trust that doesn't need explaining. Maybe that's how it happens sometimes. Not in grand moments, not in perfect timing, but in the quiet choice to stay, when leaving would be easier. If you've ever felt like the world made up its mind about you too soon, or if you've ever held on when no one else would, then you already understand this story better than most. Tell me, what would you have done in her place? And if this story stayed with you, there are more waiting just beyond the next trail. Stories about people who found something real when they least expected it. You're always welcome to ride along.